Released in 1954, Godzilla was meant as an allegory for the widespread destruction caused by the atomic bombs that wiped out hundreds of lives in Japan in the closing months of World War II. Godzilla's unbridled fury and wanton destruction is not only showing us the power of the bomb that decimated all in its path, but also the kaiju's very appearance, covered in keloid scarring. These are the same sort of contusions that the bomb left upon its survivors back at the end of the Second World War. In essence, Godzilla is both the annihilation meted out by the bomb, but also symbolic of the trauma and the anger of those who survived the bomb itself. It is their pain, their horror, their rage. It's a fascinating study into a damaged people, physically and mentally recovering just a decade after those terrible events unfolded. And about 20 years later, this movie was used to shift sweets to kids using a cutie-pied version of Godzilla attacking central London. Yes. And that hungry beast that loves his treats ended up getting his own video game, that being The Muncher by Gremlin Graphics in 1988 for the Commodore 64 and our good friend the 128K Spectrum. But before we get to look at this title and its saccharine-hungry ways, I think we need to take a goosey gander at his plasticine inspiration, Chewie the Chewitsaurus, aka the Muncher Menace. Making his first appearance in 1976, Muncher is seen eating parts of New York's famous skyline until a valiant Chewits truck driver offers up his goods, his fruity confection, upon the back of his truck. Who knew that Chewit trucks were actually just giant packs of Chewits? Mind you, I've never actually seen a Chewit truck, so that might well be the case. So follows a series of these Aardman animation produced ventures throughout the late 70s and 80s, with the voracious beast masticating on worldwide landmarks until someone hands him a giant pack of Chewits and it sort of sates his hunger. Oh, and if you don't know what Chewits are, and if you were a deprived child or are not of British origin, and maybe those two things are the same thing, they aren't. A Chewit is a soft chew that came in a choice of single flavoured packets with flavours ranging from cola to strawberry. It's a revolving door of tastes, as the current lineup of varieties does include the OGs of orange and banana. And in the case of the banana ones, well, that's them trying to forget their shameful history, because the banana ones were awful. Anyway, Chewie the Chewitsaurus has had several redesigns since his inception. Inception. But he has remained a scaly, constant companion to the candy, the packaging, and the odd scattered advert ever since. His addition to the 1988 game was a late one. Beam Software had begun programming a game called T-Rex for Gremlin Graphics, but the dollar lure of a fiscal marriage with Chewits proved too much for Gremlin to resist, and sure enough, Chewie was plastered over the advertising, the packaging, and the title screen. Though you'd really have to squint to see him in the actual game itself. That's clearly the sort of stomping critter that used to terrorise the likes of Raquel Welch in a Harryhausen flick. Mental note, don't include a Harryhausen pic here. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Clearly there was not enough time to change the sprite to Chewie the Chewitsaurus, and it's clear that they haven't thickened out the impressive main sprite with that sugar junk he's got in that Jurassic trunk. Chewie takes to the shore from his watery domain, and he starts causing a ruck almost immediately, and there appears to be no giant Chewit truck in Nippon to sate the kaiju's hunger, so shit gonna get ripped, boy. Interestingly though, one of the Japanese locales you trash in the game was originally called Nintendo in the T-Rex build. Ooh, I think they changed it. The Japanese army must have known you were coming and that the Chewits weren't going to make it in time, as they instantly launch into an attack mode and attempt to fell the monster with bullet and shell combined. Infantry, tanks, helicopters and armoured cars join the fray to put the monstrosity on his betailed arse. And you know what? With good reason. Chewie is hell-bent on turning the suburbia, the military areas and the urban areas of Tokyo and Osaka and all those other Japanese cities into dust. It is pretty clear where Muncher is getting its inspiration from. It's bloody Atari's Rampage, innit? Albeit one player vertically and side-scrolling and with more impressive sprites and a few extra moves. But yes, this is clearly based on Rampage. The army and the structures can be taken down with tooth, claw and fire, and the weight also of his enormous feet. You can climb the varied constructions, some of which have a very loose relationship with physics, to the point they're not only seeing other concepts, but they barely text each other these days. It's a shame what happened to these buildings and gravity. It controls how you'd expect and how it should on both formats. Yes, clunky and slow. Normally this is the death knell of a game such as this, but you're a bloody big creature from the sea. You should be a lumbering green mass and not some fleet-footed gymnast. Just like Rampage, the idea of the game sounds really exciting, and to a certain degree it is, but it is a game that overstays its welcome in a similar manner to bloody great dinosaurs visiting your city and eating the local museums. Breaking a city is fun, as anyone who's played Hulk Ultimate Destruction on the Xbox can testify, but in a 8-bit form that is quite limited. It is an experience whose enjoyment is somewhat curtailed. Bringing down erections isn't as good as you think it should be. You can jump in the air and turn a pedestrian into a water bomb filled with a period, but ultimately, once you do that a few times, it loses its edge. Muncher is also a lot more unforgiving than Atari's Monster Mash Rampage, and you'll let down kaiju kind with your performance on your very first few marches onto that beach, as the army will no doubt hand you your arse. But sure enough, as soon as you've got the hang of it, you'll be gnawing hospitals with the gayest of abandons. The armies clearly don't want you there, and nor do rival mutants that you occasionally counter. These fellas, they don't die, they just sort of get ashamed that you've given them a bloody nose and wander off crying to their mums. Aww. In the brutal battle of the 8-bits, I'm going to say the Spectrum is the slightly better one this time, as the garish sprites are better drawn and the game itself moves at a slightly brisker rate. It's a bit of fun, this, for a while anyway. It's a deeply silly game, and I'm all about that. Yes, it doesn't endure in the enjoyment stakes on the long term, but what does? Life is fleeting. One day you're climbing a tree in your shorts, the next you're phoning the council to install a handle in your bath because you can't get out of it. I say give Muncher a go, and eat a Chewit while you do so, before the dentures in your gob make that too difficult to achieve. The magazines, well, they were a bit divided, like a building that's had half of a gargantuan lizard tail through it. Your Sinclair gave it an 80% in their January 1989 issue, telling us that the large sprite, prehistoric romp and smash 'em up had an emphasis on total destruction. Sinclair user adored the artist formerly known as T-Rex, giving it a chunky 94% in their August 88 issue. They enthusiastically sung its praises by saying that if you have a 128k machine, then sure as God is their witness, they can heartily recommend this game. It's the one your Spectrum has been waiting for. The Commodore magazines, well, they weren't nearly as chipper about the Muncher. Ace gave it a 650 in their July 1989 issue. Man, their scoring system is so hipster. They pointed out that while the game is old hat these days, what it lacks in originality it makes up for in enjoyment, value and good presentation. Commodore user, though, they reckoned that it wasn't enormously difficult and recommended it for novice demolishing people-eating monsters, of which, of course, there are many. They gave it a 65 in their 1989 summer edition. So that's that then. We've talked about the Muncher, but let's stay with the 8-bits and look at the 80s most famous threepenny bits in the next episode. YouTube banhammers, get yourselves ready. We're looking at Sam Fox's strip poker.
Yes, let's get ourselves to the masturbatorium and bring the tissues. We need a wiping.